The Minnesota Timberwolves had a roster that we thought and appeared to have last year dethroned and figured out how to defeat the potential Denver Nuggets team. They decided to blow that all up just a few weeks ago now. I alluded to at the point of the trade that personally was not the biggest fan of that trade for either team. I don't think either team got much worse, but I also don't think any team got drastically better. But when I do look at this team, by no means is this team a team that's no longer a contender. I look at a roster that now has four guys that's been all-stars at their career at some point in time, and I'd say one guaranteed all-star, obviously, an Ant-Man. You have two guys, then Gobert and Randall, who could potentially be all-stars, borderline guys, obviously. And when I talk about this team, I'm looking at a guy in Anthony Edwards, who I believe is the best shooting guard in the NBA. I know, it's very, very close. Devin Booker, Ant-Man, neck and neck right there. If I'm choosing one guy I want to have as my shooting guard, I'm choosing Ant-Man. It is what it is. I think Ant-Man's that guy, and I think he's going to have an even larger jump this season. And why do I say that? Well, he's going to have a larger responsibility offensively. He's going to take over this team. He's now, even though Ant took over the team and even Kat announced that and made that clear that Ant-Man has taken over the team, he's the face of the team, and we all kind of proclaimed that as it. Kat was still the longest tenured Minnesota Timberwolf up until now. He was still a guy that was a franchise cornerstone. He was the guy that was there the longest. He was a community cornerstone. And so sometimes it can be hard to, move on past that part. But this is officially all out Ant-Man's team. He's the face of this team. He's the face of the community, so on and so forth. And I think he's going to lead this team to great success this season. So let's break down this roster now. The backcourt is the same backcourt that they had last year. Mike Conley, Ant-Man. Solid. Mike Conley is a great veteran, knows how to play his role to perfection. Ant-Man just discussed him. Then you have McDaniels. I absolutely love his game. Obviously an incredible defensive player, has a good offensive game. We know he's capable of bringing. He's a great small forward, perfectly fits with his team as well. Let's move down to what I think is the biggest battle on this team. There's quite a few battles I'm going to discuss here. Julius Randle, Naz Reid. Okay, so real quickly, we know Rudy Gobert starting at center, right? He's your starting center for the season. Let's mark that in real quickly. We know who he is, obviously one of the top defensive players. That's Rudy Gobert. But what I'm looking at right now is power forward. You have the reigning sixth man of the year, Naz Reid, a guy that is more than capable of starting on most teams. You would have thought getting rid of Karl Anthony Towns would have clearly opened up a spot for Naz Reid to be the starter. But there has to be debate now. You have Julius Randle and Naz Reid. That's the battle. Julius Randle is no bum. I think there's been too much disrespect going on about Julius Randle over the past couple of weeks of that trade. Julius Randle was an all-star. He was he was the core piece that helped get the New York Knicks back into relevancy again. Yes, Brunson pushed them over the top. Yes, Brunson's the guy that got them in position to where they are today. But it was Julius Randle that was the guy that bought into the team, was a consistent piece for them, gave it the city his all for year after year until they took the massive jump. And he's an all-star. He's not no bum, and I don't think this is a simple thing where you just look at it and say, hey, Randle, you're coming off the bench. There has to be a battle here, and maybe it even goes a few months into the season until we figure out who the starting lineup is. And so that's going to be a key battle, because regardless of which way it looks, you're either going to have one guy starting, one guy sixth man. And essentially what this team looks like, what it has right now, is you have six starters. That's the way this team breaks down. You have six legitimate NBA starters on this team right now, and that's a cool thing to have. But that does beg the question, which I do think, that this team is not set yet. And there's a lot of reasons that I'll address this in a moment, but you have a lot of pieces that could possibly be altered, and they're going to have to make some roster moves before the season starts. So I'm going to address that in a few moments here. But let's break down the bench now. Obviously, as I said, we know the sixth man is going to either be Naz Reid, Julius Randle. Backing up Rudy Gobert, Luka Garza. Not the best overall backup center in the NBA. I would prefer Garza to be third string. However, it is what it is for the time being. You could obviously move Naz Reid to backup spot center minutes and play Naz Reid and Randle together. But you could use a backup there, another addition at the center position. Then you have this massive group of forwards off your bench that I think is very interesting. It's going to have to be a battle because you have Joe Ingles, Keita Bates-Diop. Those two guys will be in the mix there. I like the Joe Ingles pickup. Good veteran, can space the floor. Not the old Joe Ingles of Utah, but he's a good veteran for the locker room. Bates-Diop, obviously, is the guy that I could see possibly getting cut because they do have 16 guys, but he is a decent piece to have on this roster. Here's what I'm really intrigued in. Backup small forward, or wing spot, I should say. You have a current battle, in my opinion, between Terrence Shannon Jr., Josh Minott, and Leonard Miller. Terrence Shannon Jr. was a guy that I think was an absolute steal of the draft. I've said before in the draft, I think Minnesota Timberwolves had the best draft in the entire NBA draft this past year because you got a guy in Rob Dillingham, who I'll address in a moment, and Terrence Shannon Jr., both of which should not have fallen to where they got them at. And so they pretty much nailed this draft class. Terrence Shannon Jr. has a lot of potential, can be a day one impact guy for the Timberwolves. Love what he brought to this team. And so he's going to be firmly in the battle for rotational minutes. But I'm someone that's very high on Josh Minott. And people are starting to see it. We just saw some flashes in the preseason right now. He can play. And this minutes on this team is not a lot. He's going to have to find a way to get minutes on this team. But that's why I see it as a real battle here. Now, Leonard Miller, I think there's a little bit of a gap between Shannon Minott and then Leonard Miller. I think Miller we're going to see as a guy that is going to be in the G League a lot more this year as well, like once again, and be playing in the third unit. But Minott, Shannon, both guys I could see getting rotational minutes this year that I think could possibly earn those minutes as well. And then you have another battle, backup shooting guard, Dante DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Those two guys are both really, really good. And this is part of the reason, too. Dante DiVincenzo was a massive pick of the Timberwolves, but you already have a guy that can get buckets for you in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who found his rotational role. And so that's why I wasn't as high in the draft on the trade as well. But those two guys will be splitting minutes. Can you play both of them? I don't know. It could be, we'll have to see. Overall, as rotation develops throughout the season for the Timberwolves, both of those guys are guys that should be in a playoff rotation. Both guys have proven they can play in the playoffs. They're both guys that I trust playing, and you obviously could get them both in minutes. Obviously, there's no reason you can't do that, but there's a battle to look at as who essentially is the backup shooting guard on paper at least. Then you go to backup point guard. It's pretty much solidified. Rob Dillingham is going to be a backup point guard. I just said a few moments ago, they nailed the draft class. Getting Dillingham where they got him at, huge steal for them. He's going to be great. And I think getting him the opportunity to learn from Mike Conley will do wonders for his career. That is so extremely valuable. Fans just don't realize that quickly, and they don't really pick up on that when they're building a roster. Learning from a good veteran is key, especially a guy like Mike Conley, who's a good guy. He's going to be a great mentor to Rob Dillingham. He has experience. He's been an all-star, played in many big games. He knows the ropes. He knows how to be a successful veteran in the NBA. Having Dillingham spend a year off on the bench, getting spot minutes here and there, but getting to learn from Mike Conley will do wonders for his career. And so I'm excited. I think Dillingham will be a good player for them off the bench this season, but I'm saying 2 or 3 years down the road, he's going to thrive because of the mentorship that Mike Conley will bring to him. So I'm high on that move for them. I love the situation that Dillingham got drafted into. Then PJ Dozier, he's going to be the guy that's going to be filling out the back of the bench for this team. I alluded to this, though. This team does not look complete. When I look at the Minnesota Timberwolves, there's a few thoughts that come to mind for me. I look at them and I say, there's a lot of battles you have to figure out. And it seems like the fit of the team isn't all there yet. I can't really come to a conclusion of what it is. Because there's just so many new pieces that's hard to see how they're all going to play when the season comes along. But we don't have until the season for them to be able to start making moves and figuring out who's going to fit and who doesn't fit, because they have 16 players currently. Somebody has to go before the start of the season begins. And so they're going to have to either cut or trade somebody because everybody is currently on a guaranteed contract. All 16 guys are. And a lot of teams don't like to eat money. Now, it could very well happen here. It won't be a lot if you cut a guy like Dozier or cut a guy like Keita Bates-Diop, but somebody's going to have to go. And so I think they're going to have to evaluate this team, and I wouldn't be shocked. The Naz Reid, Julius Randle situation is very interesting. Are they both going to start? Are they going to have to be one guy still coming off the bench? And does that other guy still accept that? There's a lot of question marks here because it's a lot easier to say, okay, you're going to come off the bench for Karl-Anthony Towns. He's been the number one pick. He's a franchise cornerstone, so on and so forth. But he's gone now, and now it's a legitimate battle. Does Naz Reid still accept that bench role? I don't have the answer there. Dante DiVincenzo, as I alluded to, he already said supposedly, and I know he's come back and combated that statement, but he didn't really want a bench role supposedly in New York. Is that still his stance? Does he want to be a starter in the NBA? Well, I already said, I like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think he could just be A-okay in that role. He already proved he could be in that role. Is he a guy that you trade? Do you open up rough spots somewhere else? Do you move one of the young guys in Terrence Shannon Jr., Josh Minott, Leonard Miller to get a backup center? There's a lot of moves that this team has to make still, and I think that they're not complete. And something has to happen before the start of the season begins, but also I think that we're going to see something have to happen when it comes to the trade deadline. This team is not complete yet. The team that we're going to see in the playoffs, I think, is going to be a much different team. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just what I look at when I view this team at this point in time, because they just don't seem to fit properly. Lots of question marks and lots of battles that have to be figured out. And I think Coach Finch is an incredible coach, a very, very good coach, top 10 coach in my opinion in the NBA. He's going to figure it out. I like where the team is heading, but it's going to be interesting to see where what moves they make and where this team ends up looking like. Regardless, though, they added depth from the Karl-Anthony Towns team. I don't think they got much better, but I also don't think they got any worse. I think they're just about the same overall as they would have been pre-trade, except for maybe chemistry changes. Obviously, that might be a factor, but that's going to be fixed in 2 or 3 months. So what do I view for the Minnesota Timberwolves? Well, the Western Conference, I say this for every Western Conference team, is a battle. It is no joke. There's not going to be much of a gap, I don't believe, between the number 1 seed and the number 5, 6, 7 seed, so on and so forth. It's going to be a razor-thin conference where a lot of teams are going to be beating each other up throughout the duration of the season. You're going to have teams that probably could have been a top 4, 5, 6 seed in the East, not even getting to the playing game in the West. There's only a couple teams in the West I'd say are not playoff caliber, and one of them is Portland Trailblazers. And then you look at a team like San Antonio Spurs, who maybe they're not a playoff team, but shoot, they have Chris Paul and they have debatably one of the best. You have Victor Wembanyama. I don't know how good he's going to be this year. I think he's almost guaranteed to be an all-star this season. And so that's a team we're saying is not even in a playoff team in the West. So it's tough to predict where the team's going to be. They have the talent to be the number 1 seed, but they could easily be the number 6 or 7 seed as well if that's the way everything shakes out because of how close the West is. It really depends on health, depends on how the chemistry comes together for this team. But when I look at the Minnesota Timberwolves, not at all against what they made, I think this will be a team that could easily be a team we see play in the NBA championship this year. Not shocked if that's what occurs. Is that my pick right now? No. But this is certainly a team that's going to be a factor this season. They're not out of the picture whatsoever. They will be a team that's a legitimate contender, and they should make a playoff run once again. And so that's what I think about the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the last thing to address about them as well, they do have 3 two-way spots in Jalen Clark, Jesse Edwards, and Daishen Nix, all of which I think are actually really good two-way picks there. Jalen Clark is a guy that I wouldn't have been shocked to see him possibly get a standard contract sometime later on the season. He's a great defensive player, was hurt last season. Getting him healthy, I think, will be key to see him there. Jesse Edwards is a solid two-way guy. Could become a good guy that you fill up to be that center spot I talked about to address there. Daishen Nix, they already have experience with him. Solid guy there on a two-way deal. No one's going to have a massive factor this year. Just those are the two-way spots for this team this season. So that's what I've got for the Minnesota Timberwolves team preview. As I said, this is a team that's got a lot of talent. It's up to them to determine ultimately how good this team will be going forward and into the future, because this team does have the talent to still be a competitive contender in the NBA this year.